My name's Tim Kelly and this is the first in a pair of videos in which I'll be discussing narrative form in film, using The Wizard of Oz as my prime example. Well, I would be discussing narrative form if
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could
while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. And my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain. I'd unravel every riddle for any individual in trouble or in pain.
With the thoughts you'd be thinking you could be another Lincoln if you only had a brain.
Oh, I will tell you why the ocean's near the shore. I could think of things I never thought before, and then I'd sit and think some more. I would not be just a nuffin', my head all full of stuffin', my heart all full of pain. I would dance and be merry, life would be a ding-a-dairy if I only had a brain. Oh!
So, if I only had a brain, in this lecture I'd cover narrative. What is it? Causality. That is to do with the reason why things happen. Time and space. Story and plot and the differences between them. And finally, narrative form and viewer expectations. Next week I'll go on to cover narrative form and film style in The Wizard of Oz. Note that this discussion is heavily based on chapters 2 and 3 of the Bordwell, Thompson and Smith book, Film Art. So, according to Bordwell and Thompson, a narrative is a chain of events linked by cause and effect and occurring in time and space. In other words, a narrative is usually just another word for a story. Now, we need to distinguish between a random string of events and a story. Consider the following actions. A man tosses and turns, unable to sleep. A mirror breaks. A telephone rings. However, by adding causality, space and time, we can create stories. Causality simply refers to the reason for doing something or the reason for something happening. So let's add these to our random string of events. 1. A man has a fight with his boss. He tosses and turns that night, unable to sleep. 2. In the morning, he is still so angry, he smashes the mirror whilst shaving. 3. Whilst having his coffee, his phone rings. His boss has called to apologise. We can connect the events spatially. The office, the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. The events are located in time. The action starts the previous day with the argument, continues through the night, and into the following morning when the dilemma is resolved. Above all, we can understand that the three events are part of a pattern of causes and effects. The argument with the boss causes the sleeplessness and the broken mirror. The phone call from the boss resolves the conflict, so the narrative ends. The narrative develops from an initial situation of conflict through a series of events caused by the conflict to the resolution of the conflict. Hence, space, time and causality are vital to narrative form. Also note the word conflict, which is often thought of as a key ingredient of narrative. What's the difference between story and plot? Now, there are a number of theories about this, but perhaps a simple definition is to say that the story is the whole chain of events in chronological order. Plot is the sequential manner in which you organise the story. So, for example, going back to our Sleepless Man story, we could organise the plot in chronological order, showing the fight, the sleepless night, the breaking of the mirror, and then the phone ringing, in a 1, 2, 3, 4 chronological order. However, we could start with the ticking clock and the sleepless man and present the argument with the boss in flashback, replayed in the man's mind. So that would be more like a chronological 2, 1, 3, 4 order. In fact, there is no reason why we couldn't start with the phone ringing and then flash back to the argument, so a 4, 1, 2, 3 order. Or we could even structure the whole thing back to front in a 4, 3, 2, 1 order. In each case, the plot is different, but the story is the same. Now, this brings us to an interesting series of speculations. The viewer only has access to the plot presented by the filmmaker, yet eventually we arrive at an understanding of the underlying story. How do we do this? Well, according to Bordwell and Thompson, filmmakers build the plot from the story, but viewers build the story from the plot. So the viewer constructs the story from the plot and hence plays an essential part in construction of story. I'll come back to this idea in a little while, but let's get back to The Wizard of Oz for a moment. So, in terms of the plot of The Wizard of Oz, we could start with the first few events in Kansas. So, Dorothy is at home, worried about Miss Gulch's threat to Toto. Running away, Dorothy meets Professor Marvel, who induces her to return home. A tornado lifts the house with Dorothy and Toto into the sky. But that's just the sequence of events. If we add causality, we are beginning to get a sense of narrative development. So we could say, because Miss Gulch threatens Toto, Dorothy runs away. Or the threat to Toto causes Dorothy to run away, i.e. motivates her action and the narrative development. Professor Marvel's sentimental appeal to Dorothy regarding her Auntie M motivates her return home. A chance tornado shifts Dorothy to Oz. Note the setting, Kansas, motivates our acceptance of the tornado. If we went through the film doing this, eventually we get a sense of the whole narrative, which we could describe as the story of a young girl on the cusp of adulthood, frustrated by the narrowness of her surroundings, of her bleak and dreary domestic rural farm life in Kansas, who, desiring to explore the world beyond her home, goes on a magical journey, or dreams she goes on a magical journey, in which she experiences both the wonder and danger of the world out there, outside, but who through these experiences learns that there's no place like home. Now you'll notice I've inferred a few things there. Dorothy's frustration, my description of Kansas as bleak and Oz as magical, the message at the end. And this relates to certain signals given off by the film's formal stylistic elements, which I'll talk about shortly. But first, I'll just say something about viewer expectation and how that structures form and relates to our understanding of meaning in film. Okay, why are viewer expectations important and how do they help construct the form of a film? Let's just watch the opening from Jurassic Park to help inform our answer.
pushing team, move in there. Move it. I want tasers on full charge. Step back in. Hurry, move it. Adelante, empuje. Empuje. And push. Well off. Loading team, step away. Gatekeeper. Joffrey, raise the gate.
So if a film begins, like Jurassic Park, with extreme violence caused by some dinosaurs, the viewer will be disappointed if those dinosaurs don't appear later on in the film. And of course, although you have to wait an hour, they do. But let's take this into an abstract but simple realm. Take a look at this. A letter. Let's play the formal expectation game. What comes next? Well done. I'm sure you got that right. What now? See? Could be. But what if it is this? Could be this. Or might be this. If this, what comes next? Perhaps this? So you can see how formal expectations offer certain possibilities and limit those possibilities as well. We wouldn't expect to get, say, X and F next, and if we did, we would get seriously confused. I hope this illustrates the power of formal expectations. And this is something you should remember if you go into filmmaking. You only need to imply certain things, create some jigsaw pieces, and the viewer will put them together. So, for example, using the notion of formal expectations, we can get a grip on elements such as suspense and surprise. What we normally call suspense involves delay in fulfilling an established expectation. As the term implies, suspense leaves something suspended, not only the next element in a pattern, but also our urge for completion. Expectations may also be cheated, as when we expect A, B, C, but get A, B, A. In general, surprise is a result of an expectation that is revealed to be incorrect. We use experience from life to make sense of artworks, as well as our experience of other artworks. So we recognise the journey pattern in The Wizard of Oz, as we've been on trips ourselves. But we've also read books and seen other films organised around this pattern. So we recognise the journey structure as an essential element of the film's form. But equally, there are things that don't tend to happen in real life, that happen in films, and we accept these as our prior experience of similar artworks allows us to, such as the fact that the characters often seem to sing and dance, something we don't tend to do spontaneously in ordinary life. Bordwell et al. Put it like this. It's a convention of the musical that characters sing and dance, as in The Wizard of Oz. It's one convention of narrative form that the conclusion solves the problems that the characters confront, and Wizard likewise accepts this convention by letting Dorothy return to Kansas. So both experience and conventions form part of our expectation and allow us to participate in the film's form, to make sense of the work of art. But let's move on from these general elements of narrative form to some that are very specific to film, those relating to elements of film language or film style, the specific way film, as opposed to other art forms, signals, suggests, and communicates with its audience. So what are these stylistic elements peculiar to film which constitute part of its form? They are mise en scène, what is put in front of the camera to be filmed, those elements that cinema shares with the theatre, such as characters, costumes, props and setting. Cinematography, how the mise en scène is filmed, from above, below, behind, in close-up, in long shot, with a moving or fixed camera, etc. Editing, how each shot, each component part or building block of your film is linked together to create a story. Sound, how the aural dimensions, the dialogue, music and sound effects work to create mood, define character and motivate plot development. So I'll conclude my discussion of narrative form in film by analysing the formal and stylistic elements of The Wizard of Oz, but I'll do that in a follow-on lecture.